Wow.
But that is as close as you can ever get. That is remarkable after 8 laps of competition to be that close.
I tell you what, our team member on the replay is going to have a hard job cutting this together because there was just so much action, Dan. It was just wild from front to back. It was great to see the number 16 machine getting some airtime as well. Harriet came through with a top 10 finish, but wow, at the front, trading blows.
Yeah, absolutely. Here we saw the 2 wide action through turn number 2. There's more to come later on in the race. Kinsella led at this point in time, going around the outside into turn 2 and was followed by Reynolds. It was a great pass, and this was where McDonald has his ears boxed. He went from the front of the queue right to the tail in a very short amount of time. This was a spin further back for the number 30 machine, but a quick recovery, no harm done.
Yeah, it was great to see Spark getting up there for this race 4 of the program too. We didn't see him in the last race, so good to see still pounding out some laps in that group of 5 cars.
Yeah, absolutely, and shows that he's got the pace to potentially take the win later on today. Finished second in the opener, but this was it then, coming onto the pit straight for the final time. It was a great run from Reynolds. Kinsella did everything he could trying to break the toe, but look at this as they came across the line. Absolutely nothing between them. Absolutely incredible. Here, though, are the highlights of the Hankook Australian Drivers' Championship, race number 3. They went 2 by 2, side by side around turn number 1. But in the midsection of lap 1, they spread out in a bit of a lock-up there. This was a big moment. Carl Girton running wide at turn number 3. Lucky to keep that off the barrier and lucky to keep it facing in the right direction, which cannot be said for Chris Peters.
He unlocked the car there, didn't he, and spun around into the grass. That was unfortunate for him, so we didn't see him finish up there probably where we would have. And this was a 3-way battle that went on for a long time for that 4th position, but then a bit further down the field you could still see plenty going on. But this is the one that we focused on, didn't we? Smith, Crook and Girton, and for many, many laps they were jostling it out, and we saw position changes happening. In the end, it was Dean Crook who just couldn't quite hold on. He had a couple of moments throughout the race where he tried to do a attempt, but these two went side by side through sections of this racetrack, Girton and Smith. Girton in the green machine. And I thought this was a formation lap when we're going through this, because they were just side by side through 3 corners, up through 5, 6 and 7. Finally, Girton got in front, and then all of a sudden Nico French was there. He caught up to him from back of the pack all the way up. Managed to get himself a 6th position finish.
This is a battle pack that just would not stop giving, would it? But out in front, Hayden Crosland could not be stopped. He's enjoying his time here at Sydney Motorsport Park. He took the race victory. Thumbs up to his family and friends. J-Mac, down to you.
Let's have a look at some of the highlights though, and well, our leaders didn't get a great start. Sims and Tran, they were left sleeping on the line. I just think maybe the gears in the car and a gearbox issue potentially for Tran. And have a look at this, it was a great start though. Steeden managed to get around the outside as well. Chilby for a moment there for Harwood, where we saw a little bit further on that one of the intake pipes had come off and didn't have any boost in that car.
Absolutely. This is one of the charges through the field. Benny Tran charged forwards midway through the race with a big slide and a big catch at turn number 4. However, he would also slide back down the field at the end of the race. We didn't see this earlier on. Corey Gillett with a huge lockup down there into the turn, and then the spin for Ryder in the number 98 machine. He did get that back going, but he did finish all the way down, a couple of laps down in 23rd position overall. Out in front though, Sims was never really challenged in that one, was he? He took off into the distance, taking the victory by just over 12 seconds.
Yeah, good race there from our plasma man, Australian Super Tin Tops there, and Matty Sims will get himself another race win. Well, he's had a second place finish earlier this weekend, yesterday. Here's a little bit of a replay, some highlights of the race so far. Dylan Thomas didn't get a bad start, but Aidan Williams just went around the outside. This is Nathan Prito with an early lock-up into turn number 2, went wide in the sexy roofing number 30, and unfortunately dropped down the field. Just a little bit of contact made there with Asker Sendel and Aidan Williams, and Asker Sendel did everything he could to try and make his way back from that. Have a look at Dylan Thomas though with the toe on Shane Tate. They went bumper to bumper, a little bit of Morse code here, but Aidan Williams just sitting in the back took a big advantage and under brakes managed to get Dylan Thomas up the inside of Tate. Took the lead of the race for the first time out of this. And then Tate relegated back to third position as Dylan Thomas just came down the inside following Williams. This was a big moment though where anything could have happened, because as we saw, it was Hogan just rejoining from the outside. Unfortunately, we saw Thomas come down and make contact with Hourigan, and a fair bit of damage sustained to that car before safety car chewed up a number of minutes in this before we went for a final lap dash. 1 lap to get it done. Dylan Thomas trying everything at the start. A couple of cars in the background, we're not quite sure who that was, making contact, so a bit of a concertina effect under brakes. Dylan Thomas, he knew he had to wait for the final corners there. Aidan Williams out of 5, went really, really wide, and Dylan Thomas couldn't take advantage of that one. Knowing how important it is to get the toe onto the main straight, and that could be the difference between first and second. Have a look at this. He was right on the back bar. He tried to get as close as possible. Aidan Williams snaking over the track, a little bit defensive there. And as Dylan Thomas moved out, didn't quite move over enough. Wheel-to-wheel contact went up in the air, but luckily the 68 machine came down and still managed to get home in second position in the Hi-Tec Oils Motorsport last year, and now getting a drive there of the Jared Hughes machine. But let's have a look at some of the highlights though from this previous race. And there was plenty going on. Dan McCarthy, this is where unfortunately Cameron Laws ended up in the side of Action Jackson. Of course, Hayden Jackson there, unfortunately the 81 spun out. We might see a little bit come from back. Kiara Zavatakis there, unfortunately, it looks like she's just gone off on her own accord. This was the big moment though. Ben Gomersol with a Hail Mary down the inside, made contact with Brad Gardner. Now, will there be ramifications from that, from race control? So White Dog's got a little bit of work to do. I'm sure there's plenty of people up in race control right now, and a few of them are wearing Hi-Tec Oil shirts.
There was plenty of drama, wasn't there? Lots of damage in that one. Domain Ramsey had damage to the front nose, so he had to bring that car into the lane. And of course we had the number 42, the walking wounded, and it would get even more wounded as the race went on. But Gardner was in the thick of the action, wasn't he, from start to finish?
I tell you what, he provides a lot of excitement in TA2 racing because he's always fighting out. Now, this is where the car, he just tried to pull it up, and we thought maybe the tyres are gone, but have a look there. It really shows now as there's oil on the track. Having a look at that, Ben Gomersol coming out the back of his car.
I nipped out the commentary box for a bit of a break during that race while you and Noltz were calling, and I could smell something in the air. There was definitely some sort of...
It smelled like carnage.
Yeah, yes,
That's
to
what
be honest, it probably
That
did.
is the smell of carnage. It looks like we might have to have a bit of a clean up in aisle number 3. Let's have a look at some of the race highlights though. Let's talk about how many times the lead's going to change throughout this one. I tell you what, that's going to take a full A4 paper size there. Williams didn't muck around, got to the lead nice and early there. You can see how wide he's going to Evernet, just knew to come on the inside of that under brakes into 2. It wasn't going to happen this early in the race. This was in the opening lap and thought he might have a little bit of a charge, but a few laps in he found an opportunity, and it was down here at turn number 6 where he just got him under brakes, and very lucky there because there were a number of brake lockups later on in the race.
Such as this one right here for the race leader Evernet through turn 6. But Williams was quick to respond up the inside into the first corner, the sweeper here at SMSP. Nice move from him, but there was going to be lots of moves between the two of them. That was really close. That's the closest they got all race long. I thought they were going to collide there briefly, but they just about got away with it. There is the moment. Oh, dearie me, that went on its back wheels and everything. That was a hairy roll there for the man Jamie Rowe. I'm so pleased to see him get out of there because that was a big accident.
Yeah, unfortunately that means I don't know if they're going to get that car fixed before the next race. They've only got a couple of hours to turn that round. There's significant damage on that. And of course, there's a lot of safety checks to be put in place as well before they can get that out. Steering components like that, easily fixed.
Here's the highlights.
A great launch from our front row. Reynolds had to drop into second, but it was just on for young and old. I lost count of how many times that lead changed as we saw early contact there between Kinsella and Spark.
And here was Spark. He led coming out the final corner, didn't he? And he led for a fair portion of that race. But yeah, Spark would have been thinking I could be on for victory here. Not a moment of not even second. Position number 3 in the end. Incredible. But yet early on they were really fighting for sheep stations, but the intensity just kept being turned up a notch and up a notch and up a notch again. And we saw some very near contact. You said there was a touch. If there wasn't, there must have been a feather between them. There was absolutely nothing.
And the battles raged even further down pack, but it was all eyes on this 5-car battle. So we saw a big washout there. It's unfortunate later on in the race.
Well, that was our winner, McDonald. With 2 laps to go, he locked up and he was temporarily in 5th position. And at the start of the final lap, he was in 4th position.
We were talking about that high-speed game of chess, and they were playing it from the front to the back, and unfortunately, a bit of an off-track lawn mowing excursion as he hurls the wheel. That was the 56 machine.
He's not happy with how that ended up. Poor stop, but here we are, the run to the line. What an exit out the final corner. 3 wide across the line, less than half a Formula V between all 3.
But let's have a look at some of the highlights. There's quite a few of them, Dan.
Oh, certainly were, weren't they, in that one. Great start, very equal between the top 2. And we went very briefly 3 wide around turn number 1. And there's a little bit of a touch even between Sterling and Girton. Gardner was facing backwards at turn 2, and Leighton had the first of many significant lockups.
This was the moment there where we just saw Smith make contact with Caitlin, and unfortunately Caitlin was trying to come to the inside, and that hurt the car, which brought the safety car out, couldn't restart it. Crossland, well, he was weaving and ducking and trying to make sure he could get them out of the tow. For a moment there, we thought that Sterling was going to have a dive, but he couldn't quite get it done, and then we went back to this battle. Nico French starting to head through the pack. He had Dean Crook behind him, and they had to try and make an assault on Leighton, who was in front of him at that stage for 4th position. Eventually, Nico French had a go, but Dean Crook was the victor out of all this, because while they were going side by side, Dean Crook snuck up the inside and managed to get that position for a moment. When him and Nico French kept that battle going, and he managed to get that position back.
Certainly did. Smith had a bit of a look there at Leighton late on in the race. But this is a great tussle for position number 4. And in the end, it did go the way of Nico French. But this man was peerless all weekend long. Hayden Crosland in the Carbon Racing machine taking the victory. His 4th, a clean sweep for the local New South Welshman. And a fantastic performance.
And led this race from go to woe. So we look at the highlights of race number 3. Again, 4 wide in the early stages. Gomersall made the move initially on the inside here of Josh Thomas. This was Graham Cheney, not even a sector into the race. And the blue 51 Chevy Camaro, the Rockstar, was lucky to get out of the rocks down here. At turn 7, the Danny Orr earth-moving number 5 was 1 lap down. In the end, he featured in 16th position. And this was the start of the move for Diesel Thomas, as he made up 10 positions very early in the race. This was a shower of sparks from the auto-fixed Mustang, but we didn't see that again, so perhaps it was the chassis or an exhaust system rubbing on the curbs.
Yeah, they had to wait patiently here, and Des Colley got a help from his brother-in-law there, Diesel Thomas, helped him get down there and ended up taking both of those positions off him. Let Des Colley through on Domain Ramsey. This is where we saw Brett Gardner with sparks under the car and dropping back in the pack very, very quickly. Very hard to control the car, and it wasn't long till we saw that car retire, unfortunately, with that steering damage. Remembering he had a little bit of contact with Ben Gomersall earlier in the race.
By this point, he couldn't turn the car off the final turn and managed to find a gap in traffic. This was Davies bowling a wide and allowing Brock Payne to get ahead of him. The Formula RX8 champion got up to 3rd position. A little moment here for the race leader. Would have got his heart rate up a bit. Certainly got ours up here in the commentary position. Warren Wadley doing his best to let the faster cars through, but nobody was going to stop Tim Brook, but has put Josh Thomas in a really good position going into the final race of the weekend. The gap, 1.3 seconds. Tim Brook to Josh Thomas and Brock Payne.